I would like to call the meeting to order, the joint meeting of the CAC and the board. If you could take roll for us.
Yes. Committee member Francesca Normington, Rosemary Chora,
Oh, yeah. I think it's gonna be like.
Jeff Arbor,
Present.
Dicky Fernandez,
Present.
Fisher,
If there's a.
Daniel Baum,
Here.
Like a heated advisory,
Cindy Brenneman,
obviously.
She's in the
we-
parking lot.
we Pretty much cancel almost everything.
Annette Watson,
Time and shade. But like, if we. have
Michael
something
Toe,
especially-
Present.
Chair Sue Lester,
Here.
Director Brett Eccles,
I mean, it was hot today,
Vice
but-
Secretary Robert Uten,
Here.
Secretary Arthur Perry.
Here.
Vice President Arlene Schaefer. And President Michael Schaefer.
Well.
Thank you.
Okay, so under public comments, as you all know, we take public comments on every meeting we do. And I don't know if there's anyone here in the audience that has any public comments or anybody on Zoom, but we do have some written comments from Jim Mosier, which I think you all have gotten a copy of, correct? Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Chair Sue Lester to go through our items of discussion this evening.
Do we have any other public comments? Anybody online? That's closed out completely? Okay. Let's go to item B, approve the Citizen Advisory Committee minutes from May 10th, 2023. If everybody's had a chance to look over them.
I move to approve with no changes.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Madam Clerk, we good? Item number 2, receive and file a Citizen Advisory Committee 2023-2024 proposed work plan. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at that? Scott, you want to say anything about that?
Sure, I'll just say a few words. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Board of Directors and Citizens Advisory Committee. So in accordance with the Citizens Advisory Committee's handbook, each year the CAC Chair will meet with myself and the Board President to discuss the proposed work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. So on June 1st, we did have a meeting. Chair Lester, Vice Chair Toe, along with myself and President Schaefer did meet to discuss the upcoming plan. And in your attachment is the proposed plan for the 23-24. And so we're looking for any comments or suggestions. If you have no changes to the plan, then this is an action item. We would like to get support from the Citizens Advisory Committee and from the Board of Directors that you're all in agreement that this is the plan that you want the CSC to work on this fiscal year. So happy to answer any questions you may have. No, this is just a work plan for the topics of the Citizens Advisory Committee will be discussing in the fiscal year.
I just had one comment. If you all notice on your September session, item number 2, the implementation of SB 1383. I know the board would really like your help and your input on what's going on with SB 1383. You know, members, you guys being members of the committee, get some public who talk to you, I hope. One of the things that I've kind of latched onto and a major concern, it's something worth looking at, is there something called the Little Hoover Commission? And the Little Hoover Commission looks at government actions and government programs and things like that. And they like to offer their opinions. I've had a chance, thanks to Gina, to take a look at what the Little Hoover Commission is, I guess, recommending. Did they make a formal recommendation, do you think?
They do, but they really have no authority.
Right. There's no governmental authority with this group, but they're recommending that 1383 be postponed, that the state's not ready. I'm sure you've had a chance, probably, Jeff, to look at it. But if you're interested in that and want to have that as part of your discussion at your September session, I think if Gina doesn't mind, or if Nolani doesn't mind, contact them and have them forward you that. Just take a look at it. I'd be curious to see what all of you think about that same thing. Okay, so just a thought.
Director Echols?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, brainstorming session at the September 13th meeting. What's important to CAC? Is that just open items that maybe members say, hey, here's a topic we want to investigate? Is that what
Yes.
that means?
Correct. It's just anything that maybe we, excuse me, that maybe we forgot or didn't mention in the list. Something came up. It's a good opportunity for the members of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Hey, let's consider talking about this topic.
Perfect. Thank you.
Scott, also.
Yes, we can definitely do that. Absolutely. Definitely, that's one of the purpose of the Citizens Advisory Committee is to give guidance and directions on proposed policies or any kind of amendments. So we would definitely take it to the CC. If it's not on this report, which I don't think it is, we'll add it on it. That's a good suggestion.
Do we know the timing of when that discussion or public circulation and discussion would take place or could take place in
For-
relation to this this work plan schedule? For
The
which-
trash cart?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the schedule and I can confirm with Chair Lester what's an appropriate time.
Thanks.
And that's in regards to rollout of a third cart?
It has relations to that program. It definitely relates to it because our concern is that with now that residents are going to have 3 carts, possibly more than 3 carts, there's going to be, might be storage, the right ordinance in place that forbids people to store their carts in public view. And so the board wants to consider maybe giving us some more leeway or some more discretion on what we consider as public view. Because technically a cart could be on a side of a little alley, it could still be seen, and technically that's public view. But is that still considered a
Eyesore?
yeah,
or-
it could be a eyesore to the community, you know, like that could be to the eye of the beholder.
I don't know that this would necessarily be part of the work plan, but I do want to mention it because we talked about it at our last CAC meeting. As we go forward, I'd like for the CAC to, every meeting, if we could go over any events that the district has in the months moving forward coming up, whether it's an actual district event or it's an event that the district is participating in, and maybe give some dates and what's going on and create some opportunities for the CAC to participate in those kind of events if it's appropriate to kind of get, I think it would kind of help get the word out that there is a CAC if there's a CAC member at some of these events with district personnel. Anybody else have anything?
No, this is an action item, so we would need a separate action by the CAC and by the board of directors.
Okay, well, I move that we approve the work plan with the suggested edits and move it forward. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll move for approval on behalf of the board of directors.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Bob, you're muted. I think I read your lips enough though, right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That motion to the Board of Directors carries unanimously.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item, which is review and comment on revisions for the Administrative Policies Manual, Board of Directors, Procedures, Handbook, Citizen Advisory Handbook, and Employee Handbook. I'm sure Scott's going to get us started here. For those of you that don't know, we had a ad hoc committee that spent a lot of time and a lot of days going over all of this stuff. So hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it. And Scott, maybe you can lead us through each item. And if somebody has a specific issue with a page and item, I'm not really sure the best way to go through it, because it is a lot of information and there's no way we would have time to go page by page in here.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, Chair Lester. So just again, a bit of background. So the board established a policy review ad hoc committee. The board appointed Vice President Schaefer and Secretary Perry to serve on that committee. And then the Citizen Advisory Committee appointed two of their members, and that is Chair Lester and CAC member Dean Fisher to serve on that committee. And as Chair Lester mentioned, we did meet quite often to review quite a few pages, a lot of different policies and manuals, which are all attached in your staff report. What we could do, if it's okay, I mean, I could just go down the list. I wasn't going to go by page, but I was going to go, for example, on top of the list is the Administrative Policy Manual. Is there any comments, questions, suggestions on that manual you want us to talk about, look at revising? And before you do that, I just also want to reiterate, this is just more for receiving comments, suggestions from the CEC and the board. And we're not asking for any action today because it still has to be reviewed by our district counsel, Alan Burns. So we're just looking for comments, suggestions today. Then we'll shoot that back to district counsel Burns. We'll bring it back to the board for final approval in later this year. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on the first attach, the administrative policies on page 45, talks about other paper products, and it's the post and pre-consumer percentages and all that. My question is, where did those percentages come from? For instance, paper products, 30% min post-consumer, and then TP 45% post-consumer. Where did those percentages come from?
Good question, and I don't have an answer for that right now. I'd have to get back to you. I don't know where those answers that came from.
Then I'll follow it up because I'm pretty familiar with post and pre-consumer. I want to make sure that we're not overshooting stuff that's just not even readily available in general for all of this. So if we could find out where those percentages come from, and then when it comes back to the board and CAC for final approval, how limiting does that become is our
Okay.
options is what I'll be concerned with.
Good point. We'll make note of that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Comment about going back to public comments from Mr. Mosier. He talked about wanting to have a brief description of significant changes made to each document. Did you guys do that at all? Did you? I know you did a red line version.
Yeah, I mean, to go down through the discussions on why we did it, that's very time consuming. I think, again, we recorded all our meetings. If someone really wanted to know what we discussed, it's all recorded. It's on our website.
I thought that might be the case, but you know, a lot of times we do a Cliff Notes. Hey, here are the changes you can expect. I think you probably have more changes than you can encapsulate in something like that, right?
Yes, I mean, it was a very thorough review of all the policies and some good suggestions for revisions, and just to document why that was, it would be extremely time consuming to provide that.
I think the Cliff Notes version, to kind of encompass all of them, is it either didn't apply, it was to update a term to be more politically correct, to encompass the changes moving forward with the 3-cart system, and then bring extra detail in areas maybe that didn't have them, or if somebody's job description changed, or if there was a process named that the district didn't use that really served no purpose on its own, that was redundant in another thing. Like Scott said, it was a lot of things, but there were massive conversations that took place over each of those things.
Especially with 2 board members we had, I'm sure there was a lot.
The red line should be sufficient, I would think.
It typically it is. I mean, most documents, when you do something like this, the red line version is going to take care of whatever needs to be looked at.
I just had a couple comments on the administrative policies and I think this is true for a lot of the documents. I noticed how the pages are a little bit weird. And I think it might relate to, it's in a form where it can be edited. So it makes the margins really wide and the text really skinny. But in some areas, it would take one line and it would put it on a page of its own. So I just wanted to mention that. I know it's a working document, but when it's all said and done, if we could tighten that up a little bit to make it a little cleaner to read, that would be really helpful. And on page 23, let's see, item 4, and I don't have the thing in front of me. I guess you would have to pull it up so I could look at it. But there was something. Okay, wait. Item 4, page 23. Oh, okay. It says the performance management team will meet. It used to be quarterly to review performance data and outcomes, and it's being changed to as needed. Is that something that you would have to do automatically as you needed it? Or is it one of those things that you decide to do it and it may not get done? Does that make sense?
It as needed is if I felt it was necessary for the team to get together to talk about a new measure where we want to track the data on. It was something I would discuss with my team and decide is that worthwhile? Can we capture the data? That's
Okay.
important. That's important. Can we because if we can't capture the data, then it's really not it won't be beneficial as a measures. Secondly, then what does this measure tell us? What is it telling us? What are we trying to achieve? So some of those
Okay.
questions I want to inquire from my staff to see if this is the right direction we're going. So it'd be again, if that comes up, then I would call that meeting together.
Okay. And then the only other comment I had in the administrative policies, and I know we talked about it and I didn't see it anywhere, but it shows up on page 12 and on page 14 where it talks about a staging area in the event of an emergency. And I know you don't necessarily put where your staging area is in here because it's public and not everyone needs to know that. But I just wanted to make sure somewhere it's kind of stipulated where if it's gunfire, it shouldn't be out front. It needs to be down the street or it needs to be off property, but you guys still have the responsibility for accounting for all your people. And so if you don't stipulate on-site versus off-site, depending on the emergency, you might run into problems down the road should something happen and somebody doesn't get accounted for or gets left in the building and you don't know. And that was the only other thing that I had for the administrative policies. Anybody else?
Question
Jeff?
as usual, but under the environmental procurement policy, I saw 1383 reference for recycled paper. I was curious, I think I've asked this before, but is Costa Mesa Sanitary District required to procure organics recycled products under 1383? And if so, should it be integrated into this policy?
Technically, no, it's more of a city function. So, but we are still gonna acquire those credits and pass that on to the city so they can apply it to the state. The recycled paper is just trying to be good stewardship to the environment. Our mission, the environment, right? We want to just be the leader out there and demonstrate that we are using recycled paper, recycled products, recycled like tissues, Kleenex, whatever, materials that we can recycle. We want to try to do our best efforts doing that. So.
And just to add, Scott, that is in fact part of the regulations that we do that.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Ellen.
Anybody else have anything for administrative processes?
Overall, I just want to commend the committee on what they did with the dress code markup. You know, I've been involved in the corporate world and then in my own business, and you guys encapsulated just about everything you could, and I think you did a really good job with that. I guess from when I first started in the corporate world about 100 years ago, you know, tattoos weren't allowed. Just weren't allowed. You had to wear a coat and tie. And I think you guys did a good job of getting this more into the 21st century than some of the other groups that I've been involved in. I know we have a casual Friday program, but I think you all should know that the board of directors has a casual everyday program. Right, Art?
Director Eccles gets the best dressed award.
Only time I'll ever hear that.
You know, ties should have never been invented. It's some ancient vestige that hasn't been done away with yet, except in my household.
Okay, should we move on to the CAC handbook?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll move on to CAC, the Citizen Advisory Handbook. I'm sorry, we're going to change it to the, oh,
Oh, I jumped the gun. I didn't realize you were gone.
okay,
I'll
so,
wait.
but we are going to change this to the Community Advisory Committee, the big changes to the handbook, but again, this handbook was thoroughly reviewed and the changes are incorporated in the attachment through the strike through. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Director Eccles, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Went through the big ones, the community advisory. Why, what's the need and what's the drive to change from citizen to community?
Because there are technically non-citizens who can still serve in your community. So that's why I think our feeling source is that there are non-citizens in our community, but they're still part of the community. And so that's why we decided to make it as a community.
Are you saying non-citizens serving on the committee?
Not on the, well, it's a possible, yeah, it could be started if the board wants that as an option for the board.
As far as I know, we don't have
No,
that option. So
But the
this
board
still is a citizens advisory committee. The committee itself, I understand it represents citizens, non-citizens, and everything in between. I don't see.
I don't think our application asks, does it? If you're a citizen, we wouldn't know.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know if somebody was or wasn't.
And I also think the word citizen can be either inclusive or exclusive. So
Yeah.
sometimes you might think of the word citizen, like we all live in this community, so we're citizens of Costa Mesa. But others may look at it as whether you're a documented person or the term legal or illegal, but we're all still part of the community, whether we're a US citizen or not. So the term
All right.
community, I think, is just a little more inclusive and overarching.
Yeah, and that's spot on what we're trying to.
Member
incorporate.
Brennan?
That's what we're looking for.
I'll just say it. I wouldn't be in favor of this. But
Of changing,
my opinion.
of changing it to community.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Member Brennan, go ahead.
So I completely agree. I don't think that, I never got the impression that it was being inclusive or exclusive. And I like the name Citizens Advisory Committee. I don't think Community Advisory Committee covers what we do. Is it a done deal? Was it
No,
already-
this is just this is just a conversation, and then everything we talk about here will be noted, and then it'll go to a board meeting, and then the board will be the one that decides.
Well, I would not be in favor of it either.
I wanted to just point out that one of the comments that Mr. Mosier submitted was in relation to something that had already been approved by the board. So I wanted to acknowledge that. It was in relation to the term limits. And then also on page 4, paragraph B, or page 4, section B, paragraph 1, it says single. is it supposed to be single family homes? Is it supposed to be single and some multi residences? It just was worded a little weird. It said single residences. Okay, okay, so it just said single, so I figured that was a typo or it needed something else there. And that's all I had for the CAC handbook. Anybody else have anything?
So I just wanted to bring up the comment from Mr. Mosher on the term limits. He mentioned that there were some potential inconsistencies between the CAC and the board. I think that we should have that discussion here.
I think that's going to be, as we talk about term limits in the next item,
Okay. All right.
but I think that's where I had expected it to come up.
Yeah, because the term limit, the board already voted on removing the term limits for the CAC, so that's already been done. It just wasn't updated on this document that we're reviewing. But whether or not the board should have term limits is the next item after this. So I agree. That's when we should talk about that. Okay, it sounds like we can move on to the next.
Yeah, so the next one will be operations code.
I had one question. On page 30. I'm not sure. I think it's the paragraph. I think it's the first paragraph. Can't read my writing. Where it talks about board member expenses. It says it just says board member expenses are required to be submitted. But it doesn't say like when or to who or because I know in the operations code, all expenses have to go before the board and they have to be approved before they're paid. But I wasn't sure if that needed to be, I don't even see the red line on there.
I'm sorry, Sue, what page was it?
It's, look, page 31. Oh, that's, oh.
Yeah,
okay.
it's up above.
It was on the board docs. It was on page 31. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was added. It was added to an existing part of the code, like just that one sentence was added. Yeah, right there. Yeah, board member expenses are required to be submitted. But shouldn't it say like
30 days.
within 30 days of incurring the expense or, I mean, I don't know, something, or usually there's some.
Madam Chair, yes, there is a requirement that be submitted with certain kind of documentation and within so many days of going to the seminar. And there's a whole string of things that probably should be added there.
If I might just be pursuant to whatever that. I'm assuming that those string of requirements is laid out somewhere.
Yeah, some
The
district
health
council
and
said
safety.
there are some requirements. It's probably somewhere in the state code that we can reference to. So I made a note of this and we'll have that discussion with District Council Burns and make sure that there's a time requirement when to submit those expenses.
Okay, because I didn't see anything really relating to anyone in terms of expenses in the administrative code, in terms of timeline reimbursement or anything like that. And I know most of you probably already know this, but the difference between the operation code and everything else we're talking about is operation code is based on law. And everything else is basically a policy. So that's why I was asking about that, because it just seemed extremely vague.
I'll consult with our attorney on that.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions for operation code edits? Okay, yes, we can move on to the next item.
The Board Director's Handbook.
Director Eccles.
You just elaborate on section
Oops.
3.2, which is, I believe, on page 9, which is the procedure for placing and item on the agenda. I wasn't sure, was this entire section an add, a change, I was having difficulty understanding what we were doing here.
I believe that's that language that currently existed in the operations code. So we just cut and paste and put in the operations code as well.
So it was a straight cut and paste.
Yeah, there was nothing new, nothing changed. It was consistent. We're just trying to stay consistent with what the operations code is stating.
Perfect. So if I'm reading correctly, in terms of a board agenda item, let's say I come up with some wild idea during my public comments, if it motion second, then we could add it to the agenda. That's basically what it's.
What we've been doing. Yep. it's
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have one thing on the table of contents. I think we already talked about it, but it's on page 2, section 411.1. It says pooling time right there, and then it says error, delete, but nobody's deleted it because the pooling actually shows up in the very next section.
You know.
So yeah, just type,
Got it.
yeah,
Thank you.
basically delete that line. Dr. Eccles,
Sorry.
don't be sorry.
I just caught my other question on this. So on the long list of the per diem for board meetings, so page 19 and page 20 of the document. Again, is this a copy paste?
From the operations code. Yes.
Okay. So I just see, well, I see a couple, but one in particular, Costa Mesa Chamber of Commerce, all for it. But as some of us are business owners as well, that scares me a little bit. If I'm just saying someone is there for a business opportunity, networking opportunity, and they reimburse to the Sand District for really something they're getting for their personal business, whatever it may be. It just, that one sticks out to me as just a potential problem for a future board member. No one here, but just, I don't know, just that one stuck to me. So maybe a little,
I'll talk to our attorney on that one.
thank you.
Anyone else? Guess we can move on.
Yes, please. The next one, so we think dress code markups, any issues on the dress code markups or the benefit markups?
I have one question on benefit. On page 2, section 4A, where it out the managed health network, MNN, and now it just says concern. Is concern the name of the new?
Do you know that?
That just, it is. Okay, I figured that's what it was, but I just wanted to make sure because I'd never heard of that before. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't like the,
Odd name
it,
for
yeah,
an EAP. I don't know.
yeah, it just is so simple.
Do you need to put brackets at the end of it just to highlight, to describe what it is, or concern is sufficient enough?
Well, we know what it is.
You know what
so,
it is.
yeah,
That's all that
so,
matters.
yeah.
Or maybe just to clarify through the district's EAP provider, comma, concern.
I think that's a great suggestion because because right now it just says employees and their immediate families through concern. So it just sounds like bad grammar instead of actually the name of the place, which
Yes.
that it is.
Good suggestion. We'll do that. Thank you. Okay, and then the last document is the employee handbook.
No, and I think everyone should know too, like the employee handbook is something that they look, the operations code, because it's law, and the employee handbook is something that they're constantly looking at because as soon as the law changes, they have to update something. So I think all of those get more attention probably than some of the other ones. And then the only other comment I have on kind of all of them is I noticed when I was going through all the pages on each category in each handbook where it said update, all of them highlighted TBD. So I just wanted to make sure that when somebody goes in there and agrees to whatever the board agrees to, and they put the date, that the date doesn't populate on every single page, including the ones that had no changes. Okay, because I saw. Okay, because I saw on some documents where there weren't any edits, the TBD was still highlighted, and that's why I was asking.
It was only highlighted because, HR spoke regarding this. So that's figured once the changes are approved, then we would have them all reflecting the same. Then from that point forward, as we get changes along the way, the dates will change because most likely we'll be updating policies as we go. So once everything is approved, they will all have the same date until changes are made. Then there'll be a differentiation of dates for policies.
Okay, my 2 cents on that is I don't think you should update the date of something if the document isn't changed, but that's just me. You're not making a change to a certain policy and it's been that way since 1922 or however long. I think it should just say that, but that's just my 2 cents.
I'll talk with staff.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? I guess we're good.
All right, thank you. So we'll bring back some additional changes to the policies. We'll bring it back to the CAC for recommendations to the board for approval, and then we'll bring it back to the board for your consideration and approval. So thank you very much. That was a very good process.
Okay, next item is the possibility of board director term limits. Scott, you present that for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the board director established a temporary committee, ad hoc committee to look at possibly establishing term limits for the board of directors. And the committee members that the board directors appointed was Vice Secretary Uden and Director Eccles, who served on that committee. So it was actually, for me personally, I think it was a very good process to go through because and we learned some new things about how to establish term limits. There was some things I didn't know about that was brought to my attention by Mr. Mosier. What we did learn, especially me, what I learned is that the board of directors cannot arbitrarily adopt an ordinance and approve term limits, and then next year it goes in effect. It doesn't happen that way. Basically, if a governing body wants to have term limits, it has to be approved by the voters. There's state law that says you have to go through the voting. The voters of your community has to vote for those for the term limits. And there's 2 ways you can, and it's through a ballot initiative. And there's 2 ways you can do that. You can do it. It could be citizen driven, and that where the citizen, someone from a citizen can draft language of what type of term limits they want. They have to gather signatures. They have to, I think, notify the newspaper. There's some procedures they have to follow through in the county registers of voters policies. And then the board of directors could adopt an ordinance for term limits, but then whatever that language in the ordinance that they adopt still has to be approved by the voters. And so it still has to go on a ballot initiative. And so we still have to follow some procedures by the county registers of voters. In your staff report is a survey of all the local government agencies in Orange County of special districts, cities, and school districts. The committee wanted us to survey school districts as well. And as you'll notice in that survey, about 2/3 of the cities in Orange County do have term limits. Surprisingly, only 3 school districts have term limits, and no special districts, none in Orange County have term limits. So that was interesting. So again, so and also just for your information, when we have a special election where we want to do a ballot initiative, the cost to put a ballot initiative for term limits, the minimum cost would be $150,000, really depending on when you put that measure on the ballot. Either it's on a general elections or a primary, or if it's a standalone election, that gets really expensive, as you can see in the staff report. So Alan Burns, our district counsel, is also here to answer any questions. He has reviewed the procedures the procedures for implementing term limits. He's available to answer questions. I'm available to answer questions. Really, we're looking for directions of where the board and the CSC wants to go from here. So happy to answer any questions you have. Yes.
Director Eccles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As someone who believes in term limits and kind of drove tried to drive this a little bit, or actually I should say my wife is most in favor, so I could be forced into retirement, but so I just want to be clear because the board, as you pointed out, cannot just arbitrarily put in term limits for ourselves without going to the ballot, so that the sticking point, I guess, for me is the cost. So there is no way around, say all 5 of us vote for some sort of term limit language. It's got to go on some election at our choosing, and then the district is going to have to pay the bill. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then versus say several members of the CAC collected a bunch of signatures for community members and things like that to put it on the ballot. They have to bear some of that cost. Who pays the ultimate cost then?
We still pay the election costs. We still pay the election costs. Now, the citizen involved with like gathering signatures, noticing the newspaper, writing the draft ordinance, that's on their dime. But when it comes to the election, that's what we would have to pay for that cost.
So it's not a cheap proposition. And sounds like from what I learned, and thanks to Alan and others, it is just, there's no way around the cost. It is expensive to do. I will say though, that I think Mr. Mosher pointed out too, if you do put it on the ballot, I'd say odds are it's going to pass in whatever you're doing. And that is just a fact, but it's getting it to the ballot is to me, the financial burden is the cumbersome part. But I think in general, you put it on the ballot, people are going to vote in favor of it, but it's a financial situation. So that's where we're at right now. I know it's not budgeted for, so that's for sure. So.
Anybody else have any comments? I mean, you guys have to know I do, but I want to give everybody else a chance to say something.
Just a question. Costs are, Jeff Arbor, the costs, are they strictly ROV, register of voter costs?
Yes, yes.
I'm not familiar with all the services, but what is the majority of the costs? Is it direct mailing? Is it coordination for voting? Do you have
Was it it might have been the attachment. I think there was a breakdown of the cost in your
Breakdown?
attachment.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the questions I have. I'm a little perplexed as to why it's an increase in mailing when it's going on the same ballot that they send everybody for everything else. I don't understand that. I mean, is that just the registrar making money wherever they can? Because that to me is silly.
It's all part of their cost. I mean, if you put another initiative on, or if you put something else on the ballot, if I'm not mistaken, that one item has certain charges. They all have it. It's a compilation of everything.
When you have more races, you have more down ballot measures, then the shared costs get expanded.
Right.
Versus a primary election, you'll have sometimes fewer races, but definitely fewer ballot measures because everything gets put onto the November ballot to have the most participation of voters. So you have more things on there, you can divide those costs up more depending on who you're targeting, whether it's countywide, citywide, or district-wide. So it's all proportional to.
Just kind of an adjunct to that is when we run for office, there's a certain fee that we have to pay to be on the ballot. And if we're a sole candidate, we bear the whole cost. But if 4 people decide to run for that office, then they divide it all up by 4 and we normally get money back. So to me, it's a kind of a convoluted system. I mean, the more candidates you have, the less cost, but the more initiatives and all those other things, there's more cost. And I have no explanation for that. I'm not sure Christine could even answer.
I mean, I understand like it's based on what the registrar makes it, and everybody just has to suck it up and pay whatever they say, whether it makes sense or not.
I think they'll justify their cost. I mean, I think they could justify their cost based on their standards, I guess.
Just a reminder, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, government can't just make up costs. They have to justify the costs or they can be challenged. So there should be some basis for these costs. And obviously, it's a different cost if you call for a special election versus you consolidate. So obviously,
Right.
it's quite a bit more expensive.
I mean, for me, I kind of feel like Director Eccles does. I mean, it's a lot of money. But not necessarily a deal killer for me. I honestly think every elected position should have term limits, regardless of whether it's special district or city or something. I think what our federal government is showing that people limits. I know it's not budgeted for, but I mean, I would be in favor of the board putting something for a general election, which would be the cheapest option, which wouldn't actually be until the end of 2024. I don't know, that would be the new budget cycle. But I don't know, personally, if we can give CRNR $230,000 that's outside their contract because they asked for it, that wasn't budgeted for ever, and it has happened. I mean, $140,000 for term limits isn't unreasonable if you can plan for it. That's just my personal opinion. Anybody else?
Go for the cheapest option. If we go for the cheapest option, how much participation are we going to get for what result that we were thinking? You know what I mean? If not that many people vote in it, like you say, they vote for the bigger elections.
The cheapest option is a general election.
Is the general?
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
It
I
would
see.
be
The
based
November.
on right now, it would be the 2024 general election of the three options that they looked at.
Oh, I see. So that would be the
Yeah,
hugest
the-
participation. That would-
correct.
Oh,
And they
sorry.
put it for city of Costa Mesa, they base it on 65,000 registered voters. And we have 15,000 people that live here.
Hmm.
And that's what the registrar bases these
Oh,
costs
okay.
on.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Director Eccles?
I just have. I know we already did the CAC work plan, so I may be out of order, but I'm one person, Chair Lester's one person. I don't want to see this thing go away. So what I might suggest is maybe the CAC discuss it amongst themselves because they represent a pretty significant portion of our overall community. And maybe they all agree with Chair Lester, maybe they don't, I don't know. It just might be something worth investigating because, yeah, the general, and then if they come back and say, guys, we think this is critical, maybe we could look at some budgetary things down the road, or they may come back and say, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't know. So I wouldn't mind seeing it discussed, and we know what it is now, but maybe they can get some input and go from there.
Question. I only live in one district, obviously. So my question, are there multiple instances where we have someone running unopposed?
Never since I've been here, and I don't know if some of my longer board members if recall anyone running unopposed. I've never seen it running unopposed.
No, it never happened since 2006.
But I can't remember the last time, if ever, that any of us have run on.
I've always had it.
So there's always some competition, and then the public will
Pose their own term limits.
decide who they want,
Yes.
whether it's one term or 20 terms. Oh,
Just a question, maybe I didn't see it here, but if there's going to be a continued discussion, it sounds like there will be. There are obviously, there are time limits associated with the upcoming elections and when you have to file the application, the documentation, the register for whatever you decide to do hypothetically. We identify and update what those deadlines are. So if there are decisions that need to be made, yes or no, you make those decisions in the right time frame based on, based on when those elections are taking place, even though it sounds like if there were a hypothetical, it would be the latest, obviously, for budgetary, for discussion purposes, et cetera. But just knowing those deadlines. process.
Good, but thank you. We'll do that later this week or next week. We'll reach out to the county register of voters, get those timelines. What are the timelines to put a ballot measure on for the 2024 elections? And then we can coordinate appropriately to have another meeting with the CAC.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm curious if term limits did get put into place, how would they be implemented? Would they take place immediately? Would it start after the next election of those positions?
There is case law. I think Mr. Mosier's mentioned this, that let's say there's a term limits on the ballot, and let's say that let's say the term limits on the ballot for 2024, and the 2 board members who are up for re-elections for 2024, they could still, depending on what the language, let's say the term limits is three term limits, right?
Right.
So the 2024 board directors could still serve 3 more terms. So it
Exactly.
it's not retroactive or anything. It applies after the voters vote for it.
Got it.
Well, but the board gets to make that policy, whether it's 2 terms or 3 terms.
That will be, Mr. Chair, that'll be in the, I'm sorry, Director Uten, that'll be in the ordinance itself, but the point is that the ordinance only acts prospectively, so you can't shorten anybody's term or apply it against something they've already been elected to. So you always have to examine what the wording of the term limit is to see how it applies. But the general rule is they only apply prospectively, not retroactively.
Thank you.
Ms. Bonrid?
Thank you, Chair Lester. I am in favor of term, and I would like to see this, because we've discussed this before, we brought it up before. So I agree with both Chair Lester and Member Eccles. And I would like to see this put on our next agenda if possible for the CAC to discuss it and move forward, because there are time constraints associated with it for the election.
Anyone else?
I would just, there were 2 things that surprised me. The cost, obviously, doing this seems high. Okay. The other thing, if you're going to have this discussion at your next meeting, I would encourage and I would ask that all of you also take a look at the fact that, according to Mr. Mosier, there's only 1 other special district in the state of California that has term limits. I think you need to have that discussion as to why you all think special districts don't have term limits. There is some sentiment out there, apparently, and I'd be curious to see what you all think as to pros and cons with the term limits. Okay, just make sure you consider that when you bring it back to us to take a look at.
And Mr. President, Mr. Chair and Madam Chairperson, I know we've quoted Mr. Mosier a lot on the law, but if I could weigh in a little bit.
That'd be great.
Yeah, the law recognizes a procedure for special districts, and it recognizes the citizen's right to initiate it. It does not provide a procedure for the board to initiate this. And the statutory scheme is quite a bit different from the city's scheme and from some other government entities that allow a city or the state to put on a measure to the voters directly without any citizen involvement. And I've provided some advice to the board. And so that would be an issue we'd have to not only deal with the cost issues, but whether or not legally we could do this, and whether we want to, what our strategy would be in proposing it. So we have another hurdle, and I don't want that to be skipped over, that we can do this if we want to, because there is an issue in the law about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Eccles?
Just to follow up to Alan's comment, I think, because I know Director Uten and I met ad hoc and was kind of beginning information, at least for me. And I think Alan brings up some good points. And so, and there's, and President Schaefer brings up some good points. Maybe a little bit more digging and research on legalities, on pros and cons.
Yeah.
Meteor report to be presented to the CAC that they can really dive into until their eyes bleed. But just everything that we've kind of scratched the surface, I think, and let's see what else is under there. So, thank you.
And I would just like to say to the board's credit, because when this first came up, you were gonna do an ad hoc committee with everybody, and it's like, no, let's look and see. And I didn't any of this, like a lot of what you guys already found out. So thank you. And clearly there's more to be learned. I think we're good here. Let's go to comments. We'll start with the board. Any board comments?
Thank you all for being here. Simple as that. Take a Wednesday night to come meet with us. We really appreciate it. Testimony to all of you that applied to be on this committee, whatever we call it. So thank you.
And also.
Absolutely. So we'll just go right around.
My hope for all of us is that you come to some meetings so that you can be heard and you can see what's going on. Because we haven't seen you at our meetings at all, any board meetings, anything. And it is important because, to be able to share what's going on. And we can't do that unless we're all together, and you start coming to some of the meetings.
You have to wear a coat and tie.
No, I want best friends.
Me?
Director Eccles, Perry, either of you have any comments for us? No? Okay.
Tonight was nice.
And as well, and I'll repeat, President Schaefer, thank you all for serving in this as someone who's been on some committees. This is good stuff and really appreciate your service and your time commitment to this. And I will just go back to the work plan that you have. My biggest thing I want to see is your ideas. I think that was scheduled for September, the brainstorming. Please come up with stuff that none of us have even thought of. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah.
Bring it to us and say, wow, I didn't even know that existed, or I didn't know that could be done, or whatever it is. So go committee for September and come up with some new ideas. But thank you all this was a good joint meeting and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. CAC comments?
Didn't we just vote not to have any term limits for the CAC?
Yes.
I would have a little bit of a problem if we vote ourselves to not have term limits and then we propose that they have term limits.
Agreed.
Personally, I don't see a problem with that. Only because we volunteer and elected officials are compensated and have perks and retirement and things like that in most cases. So that's kind of what I look at. Me personally.
That's something we can share with you at the next term, but we could talk, our board doesn't get.
I just think it's a
Oh,
matter of principle.
okay. No, but that's good. You had a comment. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
I will say the one thing that I guess is term limited, all of you serve at the pleasure of the board.
Yeah.
So if we so chose, we could,
Yeah.
if we want, it would be very difficult to impeach one of us. Not saying it can't happen, but we could vote to remove. So I guess that's the term limit is the way I view it.
Seems like a pay to play, huh?
Theoretically, you could make that argument both ways because we're free to apply. It doesn't mean anybody's going to pick us. And you could make that same argument for elected officials. you're free to run. It doesn't mean you're going to get elected every single time. So you can make that argument both ways for sure.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
The same
Brenneman?
applies for the board. The consistency with the knowledge works the same way with the Citizens Advisory Committee. We're learning on the job. So I'm very interested in what you mentioned about possible postponement of the three-cart rollout of the three-cart system. So
It's just a recommendation from the little Uber commission, so if you just let.
I'd like to see that.
It opened a couple of things to me.
I've had so many questions about it from everybody. It's like all of a sudden I'm the expert on trash and the three-cart system. And yeah, I tried giving information to people and it's like, I'm getting pushback, a lot of pushback.
Well, on that topic, I think it's the saying, the horse has already left the gate. I mean, it's state law. And so cities and districts around the state are implementing it. They've got contracts for their carts, for organics processing. It's kind of late in the game. I know there's a lot of people who are thinking this is too much, too soon. I don't know if there is a backdoor exit. Yeah.
We can talk about that on our September CAC meeting about the Hoover Commission's report and implementation of the three-cart rollout program. So
I was just gonna thank the staff. I had to put in the request myself for a leaking truck. So I appreciate the quick response to work with CR&R. And, we'll hopefully they'll continue to check out their trucks, regularly just to ensure, especially when they have those compressed loads at the end of the day and there's the possibility of leakage. So appreciate, but at least just acknowledging the system you have, just like I use the Costa Mesa app, it works and hopefully more people get to use it because that's the way you stay engaged. Yes, when things go a different direction, but the responsiveness is appreciated. And then thank you also for promoting this Saturday's dump day and shredding event. So come on out 8 to 11. This will probably be the last one with shredding services. It'll be the last one for shredding services this year and probably for the first quarter of next year in Costa Mesa. So, but dump days will continue. Yep, 8 to 11.
if I could just make a quick comment.
Yeah, please.
As per Chair Lesser's suggestions about community events, Concerts in the Park has started. So we had our first concert, or not us, but the community had the first concert in the park last night. So we have a booth there. So if any of the Citizens Advisory Committee wants to represent the district in the booth, I can have Nolani send you an email. Just let us know. Because every Tuesday we're out there. So love to have you if you want to join us out there for Concerts in the Park. Yeah.
Excellent. I just want to circle back around with everybody and remind everybody, tagging on what Vice President Schaefer said. As CAC members, we are responsible to attend at least one board meeting. Based on the times of the meeting, they also have study session meetings. Study session meeting is also considered a board meeting. So if you aren't able to do one in the evening or one in the morning, there's options. So I encourage all of you to please look at the calendar. They already know when they're having all their meetings, and see what you will be available to attend. So we do that. The other thing too is, have any of us reached out to Francesca? I know she was new to the CAC and this is the second meeting we missed her. And the board wants us to be better about paying attention to that. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. And also I want to say thank you to the board for making the joint meeting on a night that we all had already planned on coming. So you could have had us go to one of your meetings and you didn't. And I thought that was extremely gracious.
Tried to do it last night. I put my foot down and said no.
Park. I was in the park. I know you were at a baseball game, I'm sure. But
Actually, I was at a Lions Club meeting, so I had this video or whatever they call it. No, I didn't Zoom the baseball game. I had to put it on the recorder, whatever you call it. Probably.
And then can you tell us when our next CAC meeting is? So just so we can remind everybody here. I know it's September, but I forget the date. So we can plan.
Can I mention about this Saturday in conjunction with the dump day? We're having a Labors of Love event for a Costa Mesa neighbor who needs help. We're having a dumpster dropped off with in conjunction with the dump day, and we'll be there from 9 to 12 on the corner of Monrovia and Sunset if anybody wants to come out and volunteer with us.
Thank you. Okay, so our next meeting is Wednesday, September 13th. I hope we see everybody here, not the board members. But we can go ahead and close out the meeting. Thank you.